Okay, so we'll try this young breeder meeting for Waterloo. We have our guest speakers from Blondin Sires, Dan Brady, and from Semex, working with the Progenesis program, we have Barclay. We also have Amanda and Jordan from Holstein, Ontario joining us. So welcome everyone. Yeah, and Jenna is joining in. If you guys, Dan and Carl, want to take a minute each or so to just general background on if you grew up on farms or not, and any schooling or jobs you've done leading up to this point. You want to go first, Dan?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up on a 60 cow dairy in Eastern Ontario in a town called Perth in Lanark County. And my parents farmed there until, I don't know, maybe it's 5 years ago now. And when I was younger, when I was 15, I started a web design company called Holstein Online so that breeders could connect with other breeders around the world. And then I built websites for those breeders and built that business from 15 until I was in university. And then after university, I went to the University of Guelph for 2 years for a diploma in agriculture. And then I worked for 8 months for Alta and Foundation Sires, selling semen on the road. And then accepted a job at Holstein Canada, doing some market research for them. It was a maternity leave I filled in for. And from there, I got a job. I was there for 8 months as well. And then a new job came up at Semex for product support specialist. So I went there and worked at Semex for 9 years doing, I started in product support and then I moved into managing their embryo sales program. They didn't have one at the time and they wanted to get back into it. So I worked on developing that program for them. And then actually it's 9 years ago now, right now, that I started at Blondin, Ferme Blondin in Quebec. They wanted to increase their genetic program. They wanted to sell more embryos and do more marketing and things like that. So I took that job, 9 years ago. And 4 or 5 years ago now, we started our Blondin Sires program, which I spend most of my time on that now. I still, of course, do lots for the farm itself, like our matings and genetics program and stuff like that. But a lot of the time I'm spent on managing the Blondin Sires program, buying bulls, selling semen, marketing, all those type of things. So that's a little summary of my background, and yeah, that's about it for now.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking the fun little story was you and I first met at Guelph.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember seeing you across the room and thinking, oh, I wonder who that little guy is over there. When I get over there, I'm like, oh, he's not that small. He's just always hanging out beside Brad Lowry,
yeah,
president of Holstein, Ontario, and he is just a big guy.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Brad's a good friend of mine, and he's a big guy, especially when he stood beside me. And the guys that I lived with in school, they all were like Ryan and Phil. They were all 6'3" plus. So I was the runt of the litter. And
all right, go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. It's good to be here. So I grew up in British Columbia, about an hour east of Vancouver, and my parents didn't dairy. My dad was in construction. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. But my uncle had a farm down the road, so I got kind of started there through 4-H. And showing calves, and got really interested in just genetics and farming and really liked it. So I worked on the farm when I was really young, like pretty much every chance I got. And then when it came time I did well in fitting and clipping and that kind of thing. So I would consider it hobby fitting on the West Coast. I worked for a lot of different breeders there at different shows. But then when the time came to go to school, I went to the University of Guelph and did a 4-year degree there, got my animal science degree. And then after I completed that, I went back west and worked at Sunnyvale Farms. Pullman is the prefix, and I was there for a year. And then I got an opportunity to work at WestGen in their field service department. So there I did a lot of like genetic matings and mating recommendations for their customers, and as well as lots of international tours. At that time, there was still groups from all over the world coming to see daughters of bulls. And we also looked after getting pictures and marketing material on all the young sire daughters at that time. So I did that for about 5 years with WestGen, and then I transitioned into sales role at WestGen. So for the next 5 years, I sold semen for WestGen in kind of the northeastern part of the Fraser Valley. And then from there, it's now been almost 4 years anyway that I've been at Semex, and I've kind of worked mostly with the Progenesis program in one way, shape, or form. And now, yeah, mainly Greg and I are look after that aspect of the business there. So that is me.
Cool. So should explain, Greg Dietrich was lined up to be the speaker, but then he got held up with meetings today. So Carl was good enough to step in, and I'm sure we're going to learn even more than we would have had with Greg, right?
Perhaps, yes.
Well, would you mind explaining the Progenesis program?
Yeah, so the Progenesis program at Semex is kind of what we call the internal product development line for Semex. So we kind of have two programs that work in conjunction with each other. So we have the internal product development, which is Progenesis, and that consists of owned females that we IVF and mate to produce the next generation of bulls at Semex. And then we also have what we call the external product development team, and they're the ones that still like work with breeders across North America to make matings and then bulls for products. So at Semex, we kind of have a dual approach to producing bulls there. So we have the internal group, which is Progenesis, and then all the contract matings and work that we do outside of that. But that's essentially the goal, is to produce high bulls and the next generation of bull dams for Semex.
Okay. So is that kind of similar to what you do with Blondin, Dan?
Yeah, so we have our own internal program as well. I guess the difference would be that we also have a farm. So we milk 225 cows, but we also use that herd to try and produce our next generation of bulls and bull mothers. Same idea. We go out and buy some special females that we want to work with as well, just like Carl and Progenesis. And we also have within our own breeding program animals that we've been focusing on and developing the genetics in those herds. So we will, with our Blondin program, we'll go and buy bulls like Army or Boom or stuff like that. We'll go buy bulls for our program, but we also, like Progenesis, we produce our own as well at the farm. So yeah.
Yep. Okay. So I have a list of questions kind of came up with, so kind of fire through a couple of them. I'm always kind of curious how other people pick your matings. Do you guys have specific software? Do you use website programs like Compass with Olsen Canada, or do you just sit down, pencil and paper, and map things out, or write things on the wall, run strings between all the pins or anything? Or how do you guys do it?
Dartboard.
Yeah. I think for us, it's a giant combination of what you kind of just said. Like for sure, we have a lot of different objectives in the Progenesis program. Like we're aiming for a lot of different markets, if you will, and types of bulls. So we're trying to produce, like, for the Canadian market, an LPI Pro Dollar and like kind of a balanced type and LPI product. And then we have all the international markets. So US TPI and Merit. And then like internationally, there's PFT, PLI, RZG in Germany, and ISET in Switzerland. So quite a few different. So it just depends on what you're really aiming for there. And then to kind of blanket everything, there's also Polled and Immunity Plus that we really try and focus on. So as far as like how we go about it, definitely a combination, like what Dan said and what you mentioned. we often like select our group of females that we want to work with for a variety of reasons, and then find out the bulls that we have access to and what we can do. And then from there, then it's kind of a one-on-one mating. And we do use some Excel formulas. Like we have a team at Semex that, we can look at different probability tables. So, if we made heifer A and bull B, what's the probability of making an animal that ranks within the top, percentage of each index kind of thing. So we do have those probability tables, but yeah, a lot of it's just handwork for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, same. So from our side, I can't get through an hour without being on CDN. So we use CDN a huge amount. Our program is very much confirmation is what we look at, type and confirmation. So we build around those. But yeah, we use the genomics to help us figure out what genes each animal carries, and then try to match those up with the bulls that fix the faults so that we can continue to improve each generation. We use CDN primarily for all of our information, so that we go through and see where they're weak or where they're strong, combined with looking at the animal and seeing what we want to change about them. Together we'll come up with 3 or 4 bulls. Right now it has been a little harder, so it's actually 2 or 3 bulls. Try and figure out which ones we want to use, and like Carl said, which ones we have access to, and which ones have semen available yet, all those type of things. And then we have a little group of us that discuss each mating and then make the final decision on what we're going to go with. We breed, we flush every Thursday at the farm. So today's actually flush day. So I'm sure I haven't got a text yet, but I usually get a text here pretty soon that tells me all the results from the day. And then we'll work on the ones for next week. So we try to stay on top of things, obviously, because genomics moves so fast. So we always want to try and use the newest bulls, or always the best mating is what we're going for. Sometimes we'll try to use a different kind of bull to bring in some new blood and new bloodlines into a family, or we'll make matings that are a little different to try and add, say, a big shot of production or red carrier or polled or whatever it is. But we use, the biggest thing for us is using CDN. We look at other systems like the US system, obviously, for type, PTAT, and a little bit we'll look at some European lists like Switzerland to see how our bulls do extremely well in the Swiss system. I think we have the top 4 type bulls in Switzerland right now. So we watch that, but the Canadian LPI system is the one that we use the most, and CDN is my biggest tool. I had, just before this call, I had to close, I don't know, must have been 30 windows, because I didn't know for sure how many were, I had so many open because I was doing matings for next week already. So.
All right. So it's kind of fair to say Progenesis is, being a worldwide company, you're trying to cover all your bases, like have options for what anyone is looking for. Whereas Blondin, being the smaller operation, more regionalized, they are trying to, like, you're basically picking out what you think would be best, and then you just put it out saying, here, this is what we got. Are you interested? That fair?
Yeah, I guess for us, we look at, we're a small player in the whole world scheme of things. We're not a huge company. So we look for bulls that we would use in our own herd. So that's why we started Blondin Sires, is it was harder for us to find the bulls that we wanted to use in our herd. So we decided to go out and try to either produce or buy those kind of bulls. So the first thing that we look at when we buy a bull or make a mating is, would we use that bull in our own herd? And if the answer is yes, then usually that bull or that female will become part of our program. So we're on a much smaller scale than the larger AIs. Like Carl, we milk our own cows, so we want to find the bulls that we want to use in our herd. That's how we kind of base our matings around that. Is if we like that mating and we would have done it in our own cows, which most of the time we are, then that's how we decide if we go ahead with that.
Okay. So what's a typical turnaround time on a bull? I'm assuming, is it quicker than with Semex?
Do you want to go first, Dan, or?
Sure. So at Blondin, I can't really speak to Carl's program, but our bull program, we try to get a bull in around, like we get them into stud at 8 to 10 months old, and hopefully they start making semen around 11 and 12 and 13 months. And because we are smaller, we try to launch our bull as quickly as we can because we want breeders to start using them as soon as we can. Our program is we try to launch the new bulls as quick as we can, and usually that's around between 13 and 15 months old is when we try to launch our bulls in our program.
Yeah, so like for us, basically the early entrant bulls is what we call like our real high bulls that we want to work with as mating sires. We'll try and move into stud between 4 and 5 months of age. And our aim is to have them collecting with some sort of viable semen at 8 months if possible. Like a lot has to go right for that to happen. But that we can use some of that semen. We're primarily doing IVF, so we're able to work with a lower quality product on the bull side, so we can use sometimes that for matings. But generally speaking, bulls are producing much better quality semen at around 12 months of age. So part of our quality control for releasing bulls is semen that we release to market is from bulls that are over 12 months of age. So there's kind of two processes there at Semex anyway. Like one is, producing semen for matings, and then producing semen for sale. And so when producing semen for sale, you need it to be high quality and fertile. Otherwise, it's not going to be well received in the market either. So yeah, that's kind of, and depending on the bull, we may hold them back for use as a mating bull in our like ERS program and partner herds. So they may not be released right away, but we're now putting those kind of bulls through our fast start program too. So.
Okay.
Is anyone else hearing the feedback?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm the same. Can you hear that feedback, Graham?
I didn't hear any feedback. I heard a little lag at the end of Carl's.
No, it's like someone else is talking almost.
Yeah.
But I was watching the mics and I couldn't see who it was coming from.
Yeah. Anyway.
Probably Greg.
Well, Amanda had the question in the chat here. How do you make the breeding decisions before you breed the animal? And does that decision change given factors such as semen availability?
Oh, yeah.
Carl?
Yeah. So our matings, like Dan mentioned, T-flushes every Thursday. Our IVF schedule, we have heifers and donors on OPU every Monday and Wednesday. And our mating decisions are made, like for our Monday donors, our decisions are made by Thursday of the week before. So it really depends on what semen we have as of that time. And then we make the call. So we kind of know which bulls we're going to be focusing on and wanting to use over a period of time. And it just depends on when we can get them and use them on the donors as to like when they actually get used and we can use them on the matings. But we're definitely mating all the donors like individually every week. We're looking at who's on OPU next week, and then we make the decisions then.
Yeah, it's the same at our place. I know I've had this conversation with breeders quite a bit where they'll ask like way in advance of when a flush is, but honestly, the speed of this business is so fast now that today I'm going to get the flush results. And then after that, I'm going to get the females that are ready to start or that will be bred next Thursday. And then I'll start working on the matings, and I hope maybe I'll finish it by Monday. And then sometimes we have to go buy the semen, have to go find it. I don't want to call it a last minute decision because it's not. It's very well thought out and a lot of research goes into it. But the speed of the industry is so fast, we always want to be trying to use the very best bull and the very latest that might be available. Now, that's not to say like we've started using some proven bulls in our matings, but I haven't gone ahead and thought, oh, in 1 month we'll do this heifer with that. Yeah. Basically, I got to get through 1 week to the next. So just try and use the latest stuff. So
we will look at, like, if we know we have a large donor group sired by a certain bull, like then we'll know, like, hey, like this bull, like based on his age, should have semen available when they're OPUing, and we think that that'll be a great combination. So we definitely do that kind of planning. But on an individual basis, it's very much like, okay, what do we have available today, and match up with what we're working with on that week. Right. So, yeah.
Well, it's incredible to think when you guys are describing like how quickly you're going to make that decision like right before the flush is happening. Whereas you hear stories of people going, hey, I found this dose of Starbuck in my tank. Like, oh, maybe throw that in. Like people are throwing this 30, 40-year-old genetics that they found.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a different breeding.
Yeah.
So how much, like, are there, well, I was going to ask, like, are there certain traits or things you're looking for, but I think we got that figured out. Progenesis is like kind of covering all the bases. Dan's looking for type and some of the other things, like, but do you have any emphasis on, like, I guess you're always keeping an eye on like percentage of inbreeding or any of the haplotypes, like you're always keeping your eyes on that?
Yeah, for us, like we're always looking for different bloodlines and outcross bulls to what we have in our program now. So for sure, if we're going to buy a donor, we're going to look for, like, we want to add diversity to our donor group. So that's probably our #1 criteria when we're looking at outsourcing new donors from outside of our program, is that just some diversity. And then it's also great to get like donors that are sired by bulls that we can't use. So that's something that we also always look for in the marketplace. And inbreeding, I mean, we certainly watch it because we want to provide genetics that breeders can use on their herds, but we also will the odd time like try matings that are purposefully inbred because of all the data we know. If they're free of the haplotypes and stuff, I mean, you're trying to concentrate the good genetics too, and that's what inbreeding can do sometimes. So we will try once in a while with that kind of mating. And then as far as the haplotypes go, we're really trying to avoid all the different recessives and haplotypes, but like we do not make like H5 carriers together. Like that's something we do not do. But we will work with a donor that perhaps carries CVM or HCD, just because, you know, they still have some value, and we know we can do, you know, perhaps twice as many matings, and half of them will be HCD or CVM free, and still add some great genetics to the program. So we will work with that kind, and some of the haplotypes, like we know have even carriers have known, like we know that H5, like the animals that carry H5 have a reduced protein yield and DPR. So just different things like that will definitely affect our mating. So we are trying to avoid them. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, in our program, it is a little interesting. We always watch inbreeding. So we run an inbreeding on every mating. However, we have seen that some really cool bulls like Alligator come out of very inbred, line bred matings, because you're combining. If you combine all the good stuff, then you're getting double the good stuff. So it is the same like Carl. We watch a lot HCD and CVM are the two that we do watch a lot, but we will make some mating in hopes that we get a cross that is free. Just like Carl, we'll take some chances, but it is important and it's a little different. Carl and I are breeding to make bulls and extremes, and the regular breeder, they need to watch those things, that they don't double up on certain things in their herd, because it's going to affect your herd's future. So we will take a little more risk sometimes, but we also, like I said, we also milk all of our own animals as well. So we do have to watch that we don't introduce those type of genes into our herd. But inbreeding is one that's we traditionally have always tried to stay around 13% as our maximum inbreeding calculation. But lately, once we saw like how well alligator did, then we've done a few matings. I think we're doing one this week, I think, that's a 16%, and that's fairly high for us. But the good part, if you have a line bred animal and you use them on something that's totally unrelated, then it actually cancels out the inbreeding and you get back to a normal level. So the only thing with having a inbred or line bred bull is you just have to make sure to use them on a population that's not related, and then you're totally fine. So yeah.
Inbreeding, yeah. And I would say the inbreeding too, like if you double up on a certain genetic line within that animal, like you're more susceptible to genetic changes. So, if a bloodline falls, on a certain index, like that'll really affect that animal more so than, because you have so much of those genes in that animal. So it's a bit risky, but there is some reward, as Dan said. Yeah.
Oh, it's like the old line or the old saying. It's if it works, it's line breeding. If it doesn't, it's inbreeding. So I am gonna throw one question at you guys. I didn't give any warning about. It's gonna be a hard, tricky one. Who comes up with the names?
I know
Of the bulls?
You have like a whole committee of who comes up with the name of the bulls. If you have a whole list, you just ahead of time, you're like, oh, this one sounds like it'll work.
So for us, we name all of our donors ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's we have a girl, Laura Earl, in our office, and she kind of she renames all the females that we select as donors. She names, and often there may or may not be a reason behind some of them. And then for some of the bulls, we've named a few, from our team, just some of the higher ones, like Champion Red was one that was kind of a request, and Progenesis Royal Flash was another one that our group named. But we do have a really nice lady named Helen at Semex who does do all our bull names. So she once our bulls enter stud, then she renames them. So how she does it, I'm not exactly sure.
So at our program, it's a little bit of everything. You've probably seen on Facebook, we've had Facebook people name our bulls. So we have a new bull that was just born. His name is Day One, and we actually let Facebook make his name. He's born on January 1st, so that's how he got his name. And then most of the time it's Kim Cote, one of the owners of Blondin Sires. She gives all the bulls their names before they get registered, and we will change some every so often if maybe they don't translate, or maybe they're too long or something. We will them sometimes, but usually it's either Kim, myself, or Facebook that makes the decisions. Each bull we take, we build a brand around our bulls. A lot of marketing and brand around each individual bull. So we try to have kind of cool, unique names that people remember, and they'll remember the marketing on them.
Yeah. Well, I do remember it could be dangerous laying Facebook aside. And a couple of years ago, it was in Britain or something. They had a contest to name a boat, and the winner was
Boat Face.
Boat Face. Yeah.
Yeah. So we asked Facebook, but we also
you guys get the final call.
It has to pass the committee decision, I guess. Yeah.
So do you guys ever come up with a really solid name? You're like, I'm gonna save this one in my back pocket for like a surefire bull coming through, or?
Yeah, we have. I have a couple that I've saved, and one we used it on one. and the bull never ended up
Turning out,
making
yeah.
semen. So I
That happens too, eh?
so I kept it. Well, technically I've used it, but I'll change that name again so that we can use it somewhere else sometime.
Okay. So I was also wondering, do you guys record any data outside of milk testing classifying? Like my examples were like, do you do a Brix reading on colostrum? Do you do feed efficiency? Like you're recording on hoof trimming, ketosis? Like you guys do any stuff like that?
So
Yeah.
we, like all our calves, we measure birth weight. So we have a scale at the facility where the calves are born, and we do weigh each one. So we are measuring that and always watching. And then for colostrum, all our calves are fed colostrum from tested negative dams constantly. And then it's like, if it's to use, it is Brix tested and then frozen and thawed after. So it's more of a pooled approach. But yeah, so we do measure that as well. And then for us, a big thing that we watch is oocyte production. So that's more on our donor side, but we actually have like a bit of data to follow, because we have found that with our donors, there are certain genetics and family lines that are much better at producing oocytes and embryos than others. So we've been putting quite a bit of emphasis towards that. So those would be some traits that we measure internally. I think stepping aside from recording separately, but I think there's a lot more work that can be done, like in the breed in general, on a lot of our robotic traits. I think, like milking speed right now, I think is relatively arbitrary with the 1 through 5 scale, when we have so many parlors and robots that measure flow and milk time and all that kind of stuff. I think that would be really interesting data to have kind of looked at further in the industry. And I also think birth weight on calves, like right now it's just a small, medium, large, and it's a bit arbitrary. And I know you can get like tapes that you can measure like the front feet of calves when they're first born. That gives you a rough idea of the birth weight. So I think things like that would be interesting to have more available on an industry side. Sure.
Yeah. It's like I know where we fill the like a calf's born, the DHI book, and then you'd say, oh yeah, this is a medium-sized calf, but then you stop and think about it, like, well, compared to the rest of the breed, this would be a large calf, but around here, like we just have larger animals. So
yeah. And I do wonder how much like is entered accurately too, even on that side. I mean, I think there's a lot we can do with even the data entry at this point, even on like you mentioned ketosis before, right? Like how many farms are recording it accurately and or consistently, right? So there's so much, I think, even there that could be done a little bit on the data recording for sure.
Yep. How about you guys?
I'd echo Carl's points. I'm a big fan of robots. I like them a lot because I'm a data guy. I love data. And I think there is a huge untapped amount of data that those robots supply. And what's it called? Where no one interferes with it. So it's like pure data. It's just it's not like the calf size thing. Well, oh, is it a medium or is it a large calf? Whereas like milk box time or whatever, it's exactly, and you have it 3-4 times a day on each animal, 24 hours a day. So there's a huge amount of data that we as an industry aren't tapping into yet. So.
Yeah. Well, we've had the robot since May, and it's like we had pretty good collection of data coming out of our parlor. But yeah, it's amazing how much more. Like I love the more specific, like each quarter on the cow.
Yeah,
it's like information.
Yeah.
And that's all data. That the thing with robots is they never call in sick, right? So they just keep doing the same thing over and over again, and that's how you get valuable data.
Yeah, that human error.
Yeah.
So Amanda had another question, more for Dan. Is longevity something you look for in your herd and program? If so, what traits do you value most that contribute to a longer lasting cow?
So longevity is a big thing in our program. I've talked about it before that I think our industry puts too much emphasis on just 2-year-olds. a 2-year-old, basically the production of a 2-year-old is to pay off her last 2 years worth of raising. So she's still a negative investment as a 2-year-old, and she's only paying off all the debt that she accumulated over the last year. So we watch, we breed for longevity quite a bit. We want cows that are going into 3rd and 4th lactation, so that those cows are making, 50, 60 kgs or more, and they're paying their way. So whatever milk they're making is a profit to the farm. So yeah, we watch longevity quite a bit in our herd. The traits, of course, are feet and legs. Mammary system is a given. We all look for that type of thing. We specifically try to avoid really straight or really curved legs. They put too much pressure on their hock and down through their foot. So we watch those quite a bit. We look for great rumps. I think a colleague of mine used to tell me how the rump and the back and the spine are all connected to keep the cow together. So we look for cows that are hard topped and good rumped and wide rumped as well. So those are the kind of the main things we watch to try and improve or keep those cows around, so that they can last in the type of herds that we have, the freestalls or tie stall or any type of environment. We want to use the conformation so that they can last for a long time. So.
Yeah. So for Progenesis, do you guys factor that longevity in a lot?
Yeah, I think it's like we don't have a farm like Blondin where a lot of our animals are, but they are housed in a variety of areas. Like the donors do move on and become cows and herds. So we do watch it for sure. I think we're looking more like when we look at longevity traits, we're looking at like specific herd life ratings, productive life, and that kind of thing on our genetics, and definitely looking at those indexes to make mating decisions as well. But then we're also quite happy to see, like, and we have donors currently now that are in 4th and 5th lactation on bulls that like there's a bull called Marius in our program, and he's possibly going to have a proof in April, and he's more of a health trait production bull, but his dam is just she's going to enter 5th lactation here shortly, and she's been a really hard-wearing, like long living kind of cow, and we're really happy to see that kind for the family as well, that cow family. So
okay. So one thing I've always kind of wondered is when we have these like constant attempting to like, how do I phrase this? If I want to compare a cow that is say in her 10th lactation, milks really well, good looking cow, like say 87 point, milks really well, is that, and she has a calf in her 10th lactation, do you think that that calf is still farther ahead than a cow that's had, say, 4 generations now in that same time span of genomic, that may not, I hope that's making sense.
yeah.
Like, do you think, is it more important to have developed that longevity in a cow, or is it better to get that genetic increase each generation?
I think, Graham, what you're asking is more about generation interval.
Yes.
How quickly we can repopulate the next generation, maybe. I think that's what you're meaning.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
mean,
go ahead, Carl.
I think ultimately, like, the calf that you have at the ground at the time, like the best way to evaluate like if she's superior genetics or not would be through a genotest. I mean, we can assume that potentially the calf that resulted from like 4 short generations would be higher than that calf from your old cow, but we don't know that for sure until you have a genotest, or at least like maybe the PAs are drastically different. I'm not sure, but I think, I mean, I think now, I mean, in years past, we didn't have sex semen as prevalent and maybe on the bulls that you wanted to use, but now like that probably really good old cow was probably a pretty good cow in your herd when she was a young girl too. So by using like sex semen, and you should hopefully get heifers on her when she was young, and that you have like those genetics proliferated by the time she's 10 years old. So maybe when she's that of age, she herself is not the cow that you want to be breeding from, but some of her daughters, because they've carried her genetics forward for you. But I do think, we often make that assumption that the heifers in the heifer pen are the best genetics in your barn, but sometimes like you get matings that don't work and calves are lower than their parents, and it's it's good to watch that too, because they may not all be better than the older cows in the barn.
Okay. Yeah, so at our place we actually genomic test every single calf that's born, whether it's a Goldwyn daughter from a shottle cow that's 10 years old, or from a virgin heifer that we flushed. So we actually genomic test everything. I think the industry, like I said, that put a lot of emphasis on 2-year-olds, and now it's even on young calves, and which baby calf you're going to breed to beef instead. And that's a personal thing of mine. I'm not a big fan of that kind of situation. So for us, we genomic test everything and try to see which ones carry the genes we want. We just bought a bull. I just bought a bull from an alligator son from a third calf, excellent cow. So some people would say in today's world, those things don't happen, but they very well can. If the right genes get passed through, they can catch up in one generation quite quickly. So I'm not a fan of those situations where you have a great old excellent cow and mating programs tell you to breed her to beef semen. I think those cows have paid their way and are important part of people's herds. And we have to look outside of the genomic information. I'm a huge fan of genomics. I use it a lot. It helps us. I just gave a presentation to the UK, and if I had the slide in front of me, I'd show it. We had 4 full sisters, and they all got their genomics back. The top one was, I think she was like 1,200 for milk, plus 1,200. And the bottom one was minus 800 and something. So literally almost 2,000 kilos of milk difference between those two. And we're going to breed those 2 animals, or there was 4 of them. We'll breed them totally different based on their genomics. But what I don't want is to see people giving up on those old cows that, you can build a herd around. Those brood cows are the ones that built cow families like the Barbies and things like that. So I'm a fan of not giving up on the older generation. So,
well, would you say, would you continue to use your sex semen on those old cows, or you stick with the conventional semen?
So at our place, it's weird because at our place, almost everything gets an embryo unless they're on the flush program. So it's not, okay. Our farm's not really a good one to judge on that kind of situation. But yeah, absolutely. Those older cows, the only problem is sex semen doesn't always work as well on those older cows, like 8, 9, 10-year-old cows. But you can also flush them or work with them. And I don't really have an answer either way, I guess. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Do you have any opinion on that, Carl?
I mean, at the end of the day, everyone has their favorites in the herd.
Yep.
And, if a piece of paper is telling you like your mating program, because it's set, like you want to make X amount of rest every year, and so you have beef sprinkled in there and it mates her to that. I mean, I would hope that, if she's your favorite, you do what you want. And using beef, I think, can be advantageous in certain situations. But yeah, there is some benefit to still working with cows like that, and especially if they have the transmitting ability in them. So, and I think now, if everything in your herd was genomic tested and stuff, like your mating guide will only make better decisions for you in that sense too.
Okay.
The more data you have, the better decisions you can make.
Yeah,
that is king. Yeah. So trying to keep things from getting too long.
No problem.
Another question is epigenetics. I hope I'm pronouncing it right.
Yeah.
Do you guys factor that in a lot?
We
Carl,
know,
you
yeah.
go for now.
Oh yeah, I'm gonna go, Dan. Yeah, sure. We know it's a factor,
Yeah.
and I would think in the next 10 years, this is going to become like much more of a talking point than it is right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of data being like, or a lot of research being done on epigenetics and how it affects like what genes are turned on and off. So yeah, I think it'll be the next kind of big discovery within our genetic population. So what we're doing with right now is we work with one provider for all our recipients. So everything that receives an embryo comes from like a high health status herd, and we're buying them all from one location. That way you're not kind of getting taking recips from the bottom end of everywhere. So, and a lot of our recips actually originate from our own program. So the females that do not become donors in the Progenesis program are put back into our recip program. So our recips are actually like much higher, like quite good genetically speaking, and not all that different than some of the donors that we may be working with at times. So we know it's a factor. We've made some changes to kind of help like take that into consideration, and yeah, it's certainly intriguing. But yeah, I think it's going to be a big part of the discussion in the next 10 years, let's say. But we know it's a factor, and we just don't have a lot of data to quantify that effect. So we're just doing what we can with the animals we have and the recips that we have to take advantage if we can. Yeah.
I guess I should clarify for anyone who's listening doesn't know much about it. It's essentially the recipient having an influence on the embryo.
Yeah.
And it's not, Carl, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not just the recipient, it's the environment in total has an effect on an animal, and how they develop and how they express their genomics and things like that.
And how they're raised as calves, everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a huge effect. Yeah.
The biggest one that people can easily visualize about epigenomics is the spots on a cow. So those have an effect by the heat within the womb of the cow, as far as the recipient. As far as I know, I'm not a scientist on it, but that is a good visualization why one full sister looks a little bit different than the other full sister. And it has a lot to do with the heat in the womb, I'm told, where those spots end up. So that's a type of epigenomics where something outside of the genes is affecting the genes themselves.
Yeah. Well, even as simple as like one recipient gets better quality water and feed has bigger influence over recipient getting better feed and water.
Yeah.
So you guys, like at Blondin, you do a lot of like trying to keep everything in tip-top shape and.
Oh yeah, I mean, yes, of course, we all do. I mean, Carl's program and our program, we may breed for different things, but our programs supply our companies with huge, very influential and important animals, whether they're male or female. So yeah, we have to put a lot into making sure that those animals are comfortable. And we haven't done a lot with the epigenomic side of things. Of course, we know about it and have watched it, but like Carl said, there's just not a lot of data yet to say anything. I know some big programs in the US that used to use beef recips for their GTPI heifers. And now, since the studies have started to show that epigenomics has an effect on it, now, like Carl said, they use their excess females as their recipients because they're probably still pretty good genomically to use. So
yeah, makes sense. Yeah. All right. Other questions? Okay. Do you guys still think milk testing and classifying are required with the way genomics are going? Like they're becoming more and more popular. Like, you think it's still worthwhile for the individual farmer to do those?
Yes.
Brad. Dan.
Yes. I'm a big believer that we're all in this together. So the data that it's no secret, I'm very vocal on classification and milk recording. The more information that's submitted to the system by all of us, this is how we got the genomics that we have today are because people classified and milk recorded those generations before. So I'm a huge, I'm a huge believer in it. Milk recording and classifying is all about being part of the system, being part of something. And by classifying and milk recording, we're giving data to the system so that people can make better decisions in the future. And so I'm a huge believer in it. We classify and milk record on all the dams of our bulls, and of course, as many daughters as we can get done so that the information feeds back into the system. So so for us, it's a big one. I think people should also use it as not just for giving back to the system, but for their own right, like to see, are those daughters, are these 2-year-olds producing as well as other ones, and are the scores as well compared to their herd mates, all those type of things. It's just super valuable data. I'm a huge data guy, like I said, so the more information and the more information that they can submit and the more information can get back into the system, the better. So.
Yeah, I agree. It is important. It forms a whole reference population for all the genomic data that we submit. I think even genomic data, like when we talk milk recording and classifying, like another piece of that is genomics, and that adds data to the system as well.
Yeah.
The performance data on the classification milk recording is really valuable. All of our donors now, like, they are entering herds that are on milk recording and classifying, and the intention is that they all will be classified and milk recorded. We are putting a lot of emphasis and effort into that side, and hoping to get all that data back in, and it helps us make decisions. I mean, when we're looking at buying into new pedigrees, it also affects whether or not we want to maybe buy that animal for sure, if we have complete data on the generations behind that female. It also is more important, I would say, overall for some markets, that dams have complete classification data than others, for sure.
Okay.
As far as marketing afterwards, but
do you guys think if, say, somebody doesn't classify or milk test, but then uses nothing but genomics, like 5-10 years down the road, could that be a slippery slope where they get into trouble not verifying those numbers, or it is possible they can pull it off
In their own herd?
in their own herd?
Yeah.
Yeah. I clearly made a video about the Jenga pyramid falling by not having data in there, but
it's a gamble. Yeah.
You could gamble and do it. It's just, it's compound interest. So the more or less information you build something on, the more holes there are that can slip through.
I think you'll add a lot of reliability to your own data if you're doing it for your own herd.
Yep.
So if you're milk recording yourself and classifying yourself, like, that all goes back into your own animals' indexes and will affect the ranking within herd. So then when you're using that data to do matings and stuff, you'll have a more complete picture when you're trying to manage that side of your business.
Okay. So I'll try and finish this up in a few minutes. I know you guys have other meetings going on today.
No.
Is the art of breeding disappearing in favor of numbers? Like, do you have to be like Dan said, like a self-professed math nut or numbers nut to be on top of all this, or is there still the old school of just being able to look at a cow and saying this is what you should breed her to?
I think, the art of breeding, that's our company's slogan, so I better support it. I don't think it's disappearing, it's just changed. We have more information now that we can actually make better decisions. So we show, there's no secret, Blondin, we love to show. Not last year, but the year before, I guess, when we had the Royal, there was a red cow. Her name was Darlene. She was first milking yearling in the red show and second milking yearling in the black and whites. And she was totally amazing that we used genomics to make her. When we made the breedings to make her, we did it using genomics and visually looking at the dam of what we were going to do. And now this week, she just had a bull test extremely high in the US and will then probably become one of the bulls in our program. So the art of breeding is still there. I think our industry has tried to get away from it. But I think breeders as a whole still have passion for breeding cows. It's just kind of been hidden the last few years by talk of numbers, and numbers are useful for us, but they have to be combined with the whole package of the pedigree and what's going on. So I don't think it's disappeared. I think it has changed so that now there's more tools we can use. Like I said, that show cow was bred using genomics. So, and we have lots more just like that. And I think we have to use the numbers to continue the art of breeding so that people keep making progress in our breed or in our industry.
So would you say when 10 years ago or wherever it's been, genomics kind of came out, it was such a new thing, people were really hesitant of it, worried that everything was going to swing hard to nothing but genomics, and now that it's had time to catch up, people are accepting it as a tool to be used instead of you have to do one or the other?
People are starting. So the problem was when they first came out, a whole lot of animals sold for a whole lot of money because they carried the right genes, and that's totally fine. So people only saw that like little top echelon of that part of the industry, and then that's all they thought about was that those are the kind of animals that genomics make. Well, no, it's not genomics that make them. It's whatever people want to breed for. So for us, we use genomics to help us breed better type. And we love it. That's how we've made our breeding decisions. So I think it got a bad rap at the start where everyone was just looking at, oh, those are huge animal, huge GTPI and GLPI, but really we just have to use the information however you want to use it. And some people got scared of it because they thought that genomics just meant those kind of animals. They didn't think like Darlene, the red cow I was talking about, could come out of genomics, but it absolutely can. It's just how you use the data. Right. So it got pushed one way on the scale because everyone saw all the attention that those expensive animals were bringing because of their high indexes. But people forgot that you can use those same things, show cows or cows or longevity cows. You can use all of that data to do that. So.
Yeah, I agree. I think as a breeder, you have to be intentional and in line with what you're going for, and then breed for it. And I think the whole benefit of adding genomics is it's a valuable tool in how you can achieve it. So, I mean, you know, like in general, like what we have available, like digital media and digital art and all that kind of stuff, like there's that whole new format to produce, to, you know, making all kinds of visual appealing things. It's not just by pencils anymore and crayons and drawings and films, like, you know, that changed as well. And I think genomics is the same, like it's a whole new tool that you can use, and you can use it to aim for whatever you want. But it's important, I think you have to be intentional and go the direction that you want to use and use it wholeheartedly. So yeah, I don't think it is at all. I think what genomics does add though is it is a lot of data to sort through. So it can be overwhelming, I think. Yeah. And, you know, I think in traditions and in the past, like, yeah, a lot of mating decisions were made like by just looking at the phenotype of the cow, like her makeup, and then matching a bull proof that fixed the flaws that she has. So now you're adding almost like you could look at your cow, you could look at her genotype and the bull's like genomic and data to match them up. And yeah, it's a lot of data to consider. So.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot more I'd love to dig into all that, but we should be wrapping up. But I do like to ask one more question from you guys. Um, Holstein shows, do you think they are, or even picturing cows, are they still useful in marketing? Or like, I understand like farms like Blondin, like, yeah, you want to be at the big shows, use that as your advertising, but say your county shows and regional shows, are they still like worth taking your animals to?
Yeah, do you want me?
Sure, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I can go first, Graham. So yes, I think that's where a lot of us grew up and found the passion that we love for this business, is in those shows. The harder part about our world is that there are less and less farmers, and that's going to take a hit to some of those local shows. But I think we've seen that in the last, I can't remember how many years it is, every year World Dairy Expo has grown in the number of animals that are exhibited there. So we might see a change from county shows to more regional and big shows like Madison and the Royal. I saw the Royal is happening this year, so that's great. Those shows just get, I guess, more important if you're trying to market in that arena. So for us, that's our world. That's where we take strings to the Royal and Madison and all those type of things. But the everyday shows, I mean, like the county shows and things like that, they still absolutely have a place. That's where you can see how your animals are doing compared to other people. And on the topic of pictures, we, of course, for our program, it's huge. We breed for conformation, so people want to see what the animals look like. And we do a lot now. There's much more pictures and video that are more, in the barn, the cows at the bunk or outside at the pasture, whatever it is, compared to the traditional side portrait, which we still do. But now there seems to be much more importance on regular environment type photos. We get a huge amount of following. Our program is very visual because it's conformation. People want to see what they look like. So for our program, yeah, it's huge. It's still a big part of it. I think the industry has got away from it. And when I say the industry, I mean AI. I think breeders still love it, and it's been kind of put to the side for the last few years. And I mean, that's what we're trying to do with our program, is bring attention to those kind of things again, classification and not necessarily showing, but just looking at what the animal looks like and how we're going to correct them instead of reading it just off a piece of paper. We need to use the data on the paper plus combined with what we see to make better informed decisions. So yeah, shows still matter, and I think not only are shows important, but they are important to the future of our industry. I wouldn't be sitting here today if I didn't pick up a halter when I was a little kid and show. So I think it is a way for people to have a passion for what we do in our industry.
Yeah, I kind of echo Dan there a bit. Like, it maybe look a little different from the Semex side in the sense of, like, not all our markets, like, we don't need a high net merit donor to be shown in order to market a high net merit bull per se. But I think shows are a really awesome social kind of aspect of our business. And they also bring people who are passionate about Holstein and breeding together. And like, when you bring passionate people together, you learn a lot and you can share a lot of information just by in that social aspect. Yeah, like I for sure got kind of a passion for Holstein breeding growing up in 4-H and going to the shows. And yeah, it definitely has shrunk the number of people that maybe participate, but I think the number of farms in Canada has declined. Out west, we've seen like more of our shows are regionalized in general, just the distance that breeders are from each other, and the reality of having like a smaller local show, like there just almost isn't enough people in a small area to do that. So we we kind of have that already. I'm actually the chair of our BC Holstein Spring Show committee, so I'm actively involved in running that show every year. Well, not last year, and we're hoping to have one in 2021 still. But yeah, I think it's still a big part of our business. It's quite a well-attended show, and lots of people are excited to attend those events still. So as far as pictures go, like Semex for sure, we want to get pictures of, but we certainly do more the natural aspect of just in the barn or kind of just be. We don't do any of the side portraits like we used to. And on our donors, we want to get pictures of them in their milking once they're milking, and we'll aim to get kind of that candid photo as well. But we purchased some donors recently that had side profile candid, like the traditional portrait photos, and we're happy to use those too. I think they're still better than not having a picture at all. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've gone long enough, used up enough of your time. So I will say thank you for your time. Yeah, it was great. I got to ask a lot of questions. I keep wondering. You guys are great people to ask those questions too. So yeah, I'm sure people, if anyone watching this when we post the video, have questions for Carl or Dan, they can reach out through their websites or emails or however you can contact them. But it's all right. I'll finish the recording.